Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Bear with me 1 second here. God, I was hearing myself coming back. Tonight, we continue the gear conversation and I'll tell you the best way to decide on new gear. And you know what? I am still hearing myself. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to tell you the best way to decide on new gear and I'm going to premiere a new feature for the show tonight, but I promise I'll also do the Q&A before we wrap up, so start typing. I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. And if you're watching live, you know the drill. Please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are. Let me know where you are watching from already. Gosh, who do we got here? We've got Hervé in Brunswick, Canada. Philip and Ron are both here from Thursday in Australia. Austin in Texas, Paul in Buffalo, New York. I got Gator in Indiana, Joe out in Vista, California, Lynn in New York, Stuart's also here from Australia, Jeff in Washington, Michael in Atlanta. Got people here from all over the place. And don't worry, if you're watching the replay, no problem. Drop me a comment below the video so that I know you are here. All of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who have been tuning in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I will work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes. It would also help a lot more people learn about The Last Frame. If you could do me a solid, it takes just a second, not a lot of effort, hit that thumbs up below the video. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube will recommend the show to other photographers and we can build our audience. And of course, while you're down there, feel free to let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Lastframe.live. I just dropped it in the chat window, or you can find it below the video. That's the easiest link to share, and Twitter, Facebook, the fastest way to get the word out. So just a couple of quick reminders. This will be the last reminder for September 20th. So that's next Tuesday evening. I'll be presenting an introduction to portrait photography. This is a free Zoom presentation that you can sign up for. It's great for anyone who wants to get started shooting portraits, and for that matter, even those who have been shooting portraits but aren't getting the desired results. So let me just grab that link here. I'm going to drop that in the chat for you. Also, that is underneath the video. There we go. All right. Cool. So we're all set with that. Next up, this week's discussion. So a couple of disclaimers, right? The title, my photography gear, and some tips for you to select the best gear for you. Now, I have to be honest with you straight up. I personally find conversations about gear to be kind of fascinating because they're so different than when I was a teenager. At that point where I was getting hooked on photography and trying to learn all about gear and thought it was all just really cool. And, you know, the difference between the way people talk about gear then to the way people talk about gear now, wow, talk about evolution. You know, my cohorts and we talked about our experiences that the cameras gave us. And occasionally we might brag about a new lens, but there were rarely comparisons of cameras. If you used a Canon, you used a Canon. If you used a Nikon, you used a Nikon. If you used a Pentax, well, you used a Pentax, right? But there were rarely these crazy rabid comparisons and debates about which camera is better. I mean, that stuff just didn't exist then, right? It wasn't a thing at all, okay? So, you know, the world evolves, right? And we know that, okay? Picking up a camera brand has honestly kind of become the equivalent of which sports team do you want to support? Fans are passionate. They are outspoken, and oftentimes they will go to great lengths to defend their choice. until that company is not the first to come out with a new piece of gear or the best piece of gear. And then they go ahead and they switch brands like a fair-weathered Philadelphia sports fan. And if you're not from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar with the Philadelphia sports teams, you may not get that joke, but it's kind of an inside joke. Philadelphia is known for its sports fans, but it's also known for its fair-weather sports fans. So here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, camera gear doesn't make the picture. Camera gear doesn't make you a photography, right? So, they're tools. And there are a lot of different tools. And there are a lot of different tools for different purposes. And we can go through just about any kind of career, whether it be a carpenter and their hammers or their screwdrivers and their saws, or a plumber or a doctor with the tools. It doesn't matter, right? Tools are tools. As a photographer, you could have the best tools in the world. And look, we all want to have good tools, tools that support us, tools that allow us to do the things we want to do. But we're going to discuss that piece in a minute. But you can have the best tools in the world, but if you don't have any creative talent, if you don't work hard to build a solid foundation of photography skills so that you can consistently turn out good quality work, if you don't do that, then you are not going to be able to turn out great work on a regular basis. Now, I see Michael's comment here. So, Michael, I'm not going to pick on you, but I'm going to highlight this because it's the perfect time for it. Michael says, I just love new stuff and new gadgets, to be honest. Right. And you know what? Boys love their toys. I love my toys. Hell yeah. But here's the thing, right? I want to be clear. I said this last week, and I'm going to say it again this week because it's important to bring this into the conversation, because already I got a lot of people throwing in a whole lot of opinions and this and that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not interested in your opinions. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm keeping it real. My hour, I'm giving you my perspective so that you'll consider it. So I will tell you this. If you're doing a lot of typing, you're not doing a lot of considering, which means you're really wasting your time. Go pick up your camera, take pictures instead of annoying me and really just throwing away an hour, right? Or consider what I have to say. So here's the thing, right? I talked last week about how having too much gear makes it harder for you to learn. It does. That's just simple cognitive psychology. That's part of being human. That's not Joe's opinion. That's fact. Also, I talked last week about the fact that there are people that love their toys, like Michael. Good for you. But you have to be willing then to separate the fact that if it's just about toys, then it's just about toys. But don't torture yourself, or others for that matter, because your work is not progressing to where you want it to progress. Because all the gear in the world is not going to get you there. The cool part about photography today is that the gear is so good, the gear is so intelligent that it does so much for us. And it also gives us a false sense of ability. So the challenge comes down to, how do you determine when to buy a new piece of gear? How do you determine if you need that new piece of gear? So we are taking GAS, gear acquisition syndrome, out of the conversation, which I know some of you have been typing about. And look, it's a thing, but we're talking about seriously upgrading, purchasing, whatever. So we're not talking about GAS. What's the best way? What's the smartest way to know? Because I'll tell you what I see, aside from GAS, aside from people that just like the toys. Again, I'm not addressing you folks. So if you're one of those folks, go pick up your camera, because I'm not going to help you tonight. Literally, I'm not. Okay? I respect what you're into, but that's cool. I'm talking to the people that want to really, really build photography skills. So how do you know? How do you know what gear to buy? How do you know when to buy, etc.? So here's one of the things that I see a lot. You know, I talk about how the world evolves. So here's a piece of evolution that I see regularly, and I'm not going to lie, it's pretty scary. That piece of evolution is people going into a Facebook group and saying, hey, I want to shoot weddings, or hey, I want to shoot sports. What gear should I buy? And then, of course, they get hundreds of responses. Buy this lens, buy that lens, go with this camera brand, get this, get that, get that. And if they were to go through that whole list of responses, they'd have probably a $15,000 shopping list. And God forbid if they have the disposable income to go buy it, which a lot of the people do, they can't shoot the side of a barn if they're standing in front of it once they get all that gear. Because they're overwhelmed. They don't know how to use it. They don't have the foundational skills. They haven't read the manuals. They don't have any idea what this crap does. You know, part of the reality is camera gear today is much more sophisticated. All of it. Cameras, lenses, accessories. Much more sophisticated than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Because some of you have been around that long. Right? It's much more sophisticated. So for those of you that still are hell-bent on not reading the camera manuals, joke's on you. It really is. Because you're not actually using cameras anymore. Unless, of course, you shoot film, right? But you're using computers. Computers that create images. That's it. So how do you decide? So number one, right, you do research. How do you do that research? Not by going to Facebook and asking an open-ended question. Better yet, if you want to start on social media, go to Facebook or probably actually Instagram. Find a photographer who's doing exactly the kind of work that you would like to do. Understand it's not because of their gear that they're doing it, but the fact is, if they're doing great work, work that you admire, work that is of the type that you would like to do, they probably have the right kind of gear, or they've at least figured out how to make the gear they have work very well for them. Reach out to them. Be polite. Acknowledge their work. Tell them that you admire it. Tell them a little bit about you. You're just getting started. By the way, I get these messages routinely, but I get two kinds. I get the ones that I'm telling you to send, where they acknowledge my work, where they give me some information about them, what they're trying to do, what they want to do. And then they ask me the question, could you tell me what gear do you use, etc. Those people get an answer. Then I get the messages that are, what gear should I use for this? That's the entire message. You're damn straight, those people never hear from me. So if you ever sent me one of those, now you know why you didn't get a response, right? It comes down to be polite. Richard, do me a favor, okay? The last I checked, this was the last frame with Joe Edelman. I'm doing the talking. I'm glad that you folks have opinions, but I didn't ask for your opinions, right? Gear brings out all the internet bad behavior. I'll just keep shutting you all down because I don't give a damn. If you find value in what I have to say, then listen. And then you're intelligent people. Go and take it and use it or don't. But I'm not going to debate any of you. Go, if you want to debate, go pick up your cameras and get the hell out of here because I'll just keep bouncing you out. I have no patience. The best way to figure out what gear to buy and when to buy it is to start with what you have. And don't look to the internet to see what you should have. And don't look to the internet to see what comes next. Look at your own photography and start asking yourself a set of simple questions about your own photography and your experiences making those photographs. The simple questions are, how do I make it better? Now, that's not a gear question. That is an image question. So this is a question that's factoring in your style, your technique, your visual sense, composition, exposure, everything. Gear is one piece of the mix. Gear may be a matter of, it would be a lot better if I could actually get closer. It would be a lot better if I had more lighting to work with. That's possible. But you evaluate your images. And the benefits of this are massive, folks, because by doing this, you're learning from your own work, not somebody else's. Look, I totally get the idea of, oh my God, this photographer is amazing. I want to be just like them. But you're not them, and you're never going to be them. That's not an insult. That's just the reality of it is. At best, all you can do is be a copy of them. Why would you want to do that? You have to be you. If you want to shoot the kind of stuff that they shoot, shoot your version. Learn it your way, and you'll be much better at it. And you'll have work that is noticed. You'll have work that people pay attention to. That's what we all want, right? So you look at your work and you evaluate it yourself. What is it going to take to make it better? So let's say you decide that in order to make your work better, you need a longer lens. Okay, fine. So now it comes down to one simple question to begin with. Do you truly understand the difference between various lenses? Telephoto, wide angle, etc. Do you really understand? Do you really understand what you can do with them? Do you really understand why you would generally use one over the other? And then, of course, it's like what focal length range, how long a lens do you need, etc. You do your research. You see what other photographers are using, not by saying, what's the best thing to get on some Facebook post. I mean, God, I just wish you could all realize how ridiculous that is. You figure out what's the best thing to get by finding the images that you like, by the photographers you like, and then sending an inquiry. If they're not posting their specs, ask them, what lens do you use for that kind of work? And could you give me an idea of what distance you're usually shooting at? If you ask polite, you'd be amazed. People will answer. I answer hundreds of those kind of questions a week, but I don't answer lazy questions. I don't answer questions where people just assume I'm some encyclopedia of photography that is going to give them all the correct answers when they're lazy. Never. I don't answer those. I refuse. So you let the demand drive what gear you get. And you have to prioritize. You should visit when purchasing gear, especially if you're just starting out, folks, if you're new to photography. And even if you're not just starting out, but if you're at a point where you're starting to build your system, you're starting to build your kit, and this is new for you, maybe you've been shooting for a while, but now you've got the bug and you're taking it serious and you want to expand and grow. So then now is the time that you go to a local camera store, okay? You go to a local camera store and you touch it and you hold it and you feel it and you compare it to other things. But you do your research. Going out and just buying it because it's cool, you'll have a lot of cool stuff. Good for you. It's nice if you have disposable income, but it also means you're making your money somewhere else. Photography is a hobby and your work is not progressing. And again, I'm not trash talking anybody. I'm saying, look, I can't teach those photographers because those photographers are never going to focus, pun intended, on the same value sets that I do, that many photographers do. And that is image creation. And that's cool. Good for them. You know, again, it's like, you know, people with their cars, motorheads. I'll never get that from me. I drive in, a battery operated car. So it's like, I'm all about transportation. Get me from point A to point B. I don't know about horsepower. I don't care about any of that crap. That's me, right? But there are people where it's all about the horsepower. It's all about what's under the hood. And good for them, right? So again, it all depends on what you're into. But if you are into making great images and into improving your skill sets, it all comes back to foundation. And you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say it, but you got to read those manuals. You've got to learn the foundational skills. You've got to put in the research. That's where you should be putting your effort, okay? not watching YouTube videos, not seeing what everybody else is using and saying, oh, I've got to get that. That's not going to get you there. So honestly, it's a really simple process. You know, ironically, you guys know that I left the Olympus Visionary program last year. I purchased some Sony gear earlier in the year. I was using Sony briefly before I started with Olympus. I've gone all in on Sony now. I'm not using Sony lenses. I'll talk to you next week about the lens choices that I made. But I very much have a love-hate relationship with my camera brand. I'm very happy with the two camera models that I use. I have 3 Sony bodies. Actually, I have 4 because that's a Sony camera. But other than that, I have 3 Sony bodies that I shoot stills with. I have the A7R4A, that's the 61 megapixel, and I have 2 of the A7 IVs. Very happy with the cameras, very happy. They are meeting all my needs. They're not nearly as big as Sony cameras used to be. In fact, they're only fractionally larger physically than the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark III and the new OM1. So they're very small camera bodies, very lightweight, fractionally larger, fractionally heavier, but fractionally. I'm not using Sony lenses because I refuse for several reasons, and I'll talk about that next week. But if you ask me if I really love the Sony brand and I really believe in the Sony brand, I would tell you no, I hate the Sony brand. There are so many things about Sony that I can't stand. First of all, the fact that they have, what is it, like 15 or 18 different bodies. The fact that most people don't even know the difference between the R and the S designation in Sony camera bodies, which just adds to confusion. So Sony has created this rabid user base, but yet they're actually not very good at explaining how their cameras are actually designed and who they're designed for and what purposes they're designed for. And I am of the mentality, screw that. Stop giving me, one camera that is only good for this or one camera that is only good for that. Give me general purpose cameras, because look at, what do you hear? What do you hear about photography today? You should be learning video as much as you are learning stills. But yet, here's Sony making cameras that are video-centric and cameras that are still-centric. I don't have a lot of respect for that. So I'm not a fan of the brand at all. I didn't buy any of their lenses, and I'm not going to buy any of their lenses. But those two camera models, I like what they do. So I told you that I was going to premiere a new feature tonight.
Check this out.
That's it, in my kit. So here's what it is. Each week, I'm going to pick a different piece of gear from my kit, and I'm going to do a breakdown about it. Why and how I use it. And even give you some information to help you decide if it's something that you need now, down the road, or for that matter, maybe never, right? So it'll be like a 5-minute segment every week. It's not going to take up a lot of time, but I want to use it to be able to really go through different categories of gear, different pieces of gear, to really try and create some education about what is this piece of gear going to really do for you? Why would you pick one over another? Etc. So this week, from my kit, I decided I would launch this feature with a piece of gear that, in my opinion, many photographers don't own, but they should own. And that is a monopod. My monopod of choice is the Sirui AM326M carbon fiber monopod. Whoops, I picked up the wrong one. Okay, that's what it looks like right there, but I'll come back to that in a minute, okay? First, let's talk about monopods in general. A monopod basically is, a one-legged tripod, right? It's not gonna stand up on its own, which makes it a very portable camera support. It's quick to set up, quick to take it down, and really quick to move it. Monopods believe me, have saved my butt many, many times. They come in handy in, I was going to say several, but honestly, many different ways. First of all, they're fantastic when it's not practical to carry a tripod, but you still want some support. Now, in the case of a monopod, that support is usually going to be for longer and heavier telephoto lenses to help you get more stability. And keep in mind, having that support provides more stability than hand holding, and it alleviates some extra weight that usually comes with the longer lenses. Yeah, believe me. Sports and wildlife photographers consider monopod to be one of their most essential pieces of kit because they need to be ready to shoot at any moment. Yet hand holding those really heavy, long lenses for hours on end, look, that's just not practical. I don't care how young or how old you are. That's where monopods are amazing. A monopod is also the perfect camera support when you're shooting in environments where tripods are not practical or not permitted. Norm, I saw you just asked about that. A tripod in a crowded area, it's a recipe for disaster. Not to mention, you best have good liability insurance if you're going to set up a tripod around a lot of people. Also, in a lot of cases, you'll see signs posted, no tripods allowed, yet security guards will allow you to get by with using these. Not always, but frequently, right? Monopods also can allow you to get elevated camera angles, which people tend to not think about. So it allows you to get shots above crowds, or even for that matter, to create more interesting architectural images or real estate images. And just to give you a sense get a little bit more information on what I'm talking about, creative views, let me drop the link in here in the chat. I have a video that I did a couple years back, okay, that will break that down for you and show you kind of some of those tricks, all right? So the moral is, though, monopods are not just for sports and wildlife and long lenses. I use them for events. I use them for real estate work, architectural shots, outdoor portraits, and model shots, right? Most of the longer lenses that you would use with a monopod for support, they have a tripod collar that allows you to mount the monopod on the lens. And then, of course, you can quickly rotate from vertical to horizontal. Super easy. If you're working with shorter lenses that don't have a tripod collar, you go ahead and you mount the camera on your ball head, okay, or excuse me, on your monopod, but then use a ball head to be able to change the camera positioning, to adjust it, right? Downside to monopods, they don't have 3 legs, which means they're not going to be a whole lot of use for long exposures like astrophotography, right? Where any kind of camera movement is simply going to ruin your shots. So that's where tripods are valuable, because with a tripod, you can lock everything down and you eliminate any chance of movement during the exposure. Now, you can generally get monopods in 2 different materials. Same with tripods, carbon fiber or aluminum. The carbon fiber versions are always pricier and almost always considerably lighter and almost always more durable, right? So that brings me back to my monopod of choice. As I mentioned, it's the Sirui AM326M carbon fiber monopod. So yes, just so we can clear this up right now, Sirui is pronounced Sirui, S-O-O-R-A-Y. Think of it that way, Sirui, okay? So Sirui is a relatively new manufacturer that's based in Hong Kong. I own a few of their ball heads that have performed wonderfully, and my previous monopod looks almost the same, was the Sirui AM306M, which is the exact same monopod as the one I've been holding, but this is the aluminum version, which is less expensive, heavier, and it's made out of aluminum, right? So the 326M, which is the one we're talking about here, it supports up to 22 pounds. In fact, here, let me put down the aluminum one before I drop it. It supports up to 22 pounds, which that's plenty for most body and lens combinations, even up to such as like the 600 millimeter, okay? By comparison, the aluminum model, which I showed you, it only supports up to 16 pounds. So carbon fiber, much stronger, can hold a lot more, right? Both models are built with a 6-section tube that collapses all the way down to 15.6 inches, which I just want to show you. 15.6 inches, to give you a real good sense of the size. Here is the backpack, the think tank bag that I use most of the time. This monopod sits right in the pocket, doesn't stick up too high, very convenient, okay? So we've got the 6-section tube, collapses to 15.6 inches. It extends to 61.4 inches, which is just over 5 feet. It uses the sealed twist locks. Let me bring that picture back up here. They're the rubber twist locks, which they're not as quick as clip locks, but for me, I find that they hold and they lock much better and they don't wear out as fast. Everything I've ever had in a tripod or a monopod with a clip lock tends to eventually wear out, okay? The 326M, which I have here, it's topped with a 57 millimeter base, which gives you ample coverage for camera bodies and tripod mounts. It also has reversible 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch screw on the top for tripod heads or cameras. So if you're going to use like a ball head, you're generally going to use a 3/8 inch screw. If you're going to use a camera, it's generally going to be the 1/4 inch, right? At the bottom, you have a retractable stainless steel spike for soft terrain outdoors. And then, of course, you can roll that down to the rubber tip base for indoor use, okay? Also, it has, there we go. It has a soft foam wrap that is really great in cold weather. And you can see in the picture, it comes with a small carabiner type belt hook, a wrist strap, and a small compass, right? For me, the compass, it gets removed and tossed. It's kind of cheap, and I don't do a lot of hiking and outdoor stuff. Plus, I have the compass in my iPhone if I need it. The wrist strap is really handy, and if you find value in the carabiner, honestly, my advice would be go ahead and replace that with a slightly more durable one. This one's not bad, but it's also not the most heavy-duty one, okay? Oh, and I almost forgot. This is like the best part. It weighs less than a pound. Less than a pound. 15.9 ounces. And yes, the aluminum one, it's heavier. It's over a pound, okay? So at less than $100, the Sirui AM326M carbon fiber monopod, it's my go-to monopod. And yes, I have used a lot of monopods. I've been using monopods, honestly, since I was a teenager. They are awesome, okay? Now, a couple of things that are important to note here. Understand, and I see there's some questions coming in, so I may be answering some of these, but I'll come back. A monopod is not a replacement for a tripod. These are two very different pieces of gear with two very different purposes. But in my opinion, both are priorities for any photographer's kit. Both have uses for anybody that's serious about photography. Okay? Next week, from my kit, I'm going to talk about my Tamron lenses, why I chose Tamron over Sony, and for that matter, any other brand. And I'll also break down why I selected the focal lengths that are in my kit. Oh, and before I forget, there's a link in the description below the video. In fact, here, I'll drop it into the chat too. I reached out to the folks at Sirui, told them I was going to talk about this, and they did give me a discount code that you can use on that particular monopod. All that information is there, and it's down underneath. I'm not getting paid for this video, though, okay? This is the monopod that I use. As I said, I have both of them. I made a mistake when I bought the first one. There's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a very nice monopod. Cost me about $50. it also did come with the wrist strap and the carabiner. You can see I took them off for this one. It's easy to take them off. The moral to the story, do your research. Here I am telling you to do your research. I didn't do enough research. I figured for the extra $30, why would I buy carbon fiber? Like, this is plenty. This is really noticeably heavier. Add this to the rest of the kit. The carbon fiber is awesome. I mean, this thing weighs nothing, okay? So that's why I have two. I'll be selling this one. Anybody local interested in a monopod, reach out. Carbon fiber makes all the difference in the world for me. So again, next week though, we'll get into the Tamron stuff, why I chose the focal lengths that I did. I'll let you in on some really interesting information that not a lot of people realize about Tamron as a company, and also why they make the focal lengths that they do. Definitely some cool little tidbits of information there. Okay, so scrolling on back here, and let's start with your questions. Right, I know that there's a bunch in here, but go ahead and type. We've got some time. What have you been up to? What have you been shooting? What are you struggling with? How can I help you with your photography? All right. So let's just see here. I'm going to go back to where everybody started chatting about all their stuff. And okay, let's find the first questions here. And okay. So Danny makes a point here that you guys hear me talk about a lot. Let's see if I can get this a little bigger on here. No, that's as big as that's going to get. Sorry, guys. I thought I might be able to make it larger. But camera and lighting companies need to make money, so they constantly push new products that claim to take your photography to a new level. Yeah, and even when they don't claim that it's going to take your photography to a new level, a lot of times it's just a revolutionary, in air quotes, design, or it's got cool racing stripes, or there is I don't want to dump on any companies tonight if I can help it, but there's a very popular company that just came out with a brand new item this week with a European photographer's name on it. So it's branded with that photographer's name. And they have like 2 or 3 different sizes. The biggest size I think is like $60. And worst part of it is it's not a bad piece of kit. It's a little bit misleading in the samples that they show you, but you could go out and you could DIY your own with material that you can buy on Amazon for less than $20, as opposed to spending almost $70, right? So part of the gear stuff that's worth noting, gang, is when companies do come up with take your photography to the next level, as Danny says, or revolutionary stuff, one of the questions you have to ask yourself, and you should ask yourself, the smart question to ask is, well, this is really cool. But believe me, look, I'm no different than anybody else. I see new stuff come out. It's like, hey, that's cool. But you got to be honest with yourself in the sense of, is it really going to improve my photography? Better yet, a question to ask is, how often am I likely to use this? Now, I'll be honest, I have been known to purchase gear because it is going to create convenience for me, save me some time, right? It's got to save me quite a bit of time, streamline my process, but I'll invest money for that because my time is valuable to me. I will upgrade gear if it is going to make the job easier for me. Maybe it has a capability that in the past I've been kind of DIYing it, et cetera. But more often than not, if I'm not going to use that piece of gear a lot, I'm going to try and find a way to DIY it, okay? So, I strongly encourage that because, one of the great things about DIYing, it's not just about saving money. I don't DIY. You guys know I have a lot of videos with DIY things. I don't DIY because I'm cheap. Far from it. I DIY simply because I can, meaning why would I give a company X amount of dollars for something that I can make for myself for a fraction of the cost, especially if I'm only going to use that thing from time to time. Certainly, if it's a primary piece of gear that I'm going to use every time I pick up a camera, I want the best on the market. I want it to be well manufactured, well machined. I want it to be durable, and I want it to provide me high quality results. But if it's an occasional use thing, why would I spend the extra money? I mean, it doesn't make sense, okay? So Norm, you would ask, can you use a monopod when tripods aren't allowed? Frequently, in my experience, yeah, security guards will not say a word about a monopod because it's portable and it's with you, and you're not letting go of it, and there it sits. So I can't guarantee you, like everywhere that says no tripods, you can get away with a monopod, but I'll tell you many, many times, yes, I have been able to get away with a monopod in situations where tripods are not allowed. And again, a monopod is simply support, right? That's what you're using it for, unless you're using it for kind of the elevated method that I talked about, okay? Norm also asked, would you ever consider putting a ball head on a monopod? Well, I kind of touched on this, and the answer is absolutely, okay? I will use a ball head if I'm using a camera with a shorter lens, but it all depends on what you're shooting. So again, there's no one size fits all answer, Norm. Some people will use kind of the L-shaped brackets where you can, drop the camera down from the bracket to be able to go from horizontal to vertical. Other people will use a ball head. It all depends on your taste. Make sure, if you're going to go with a ball head, though, the biggest mistake I see people making with ball heads is they buy cheap ball heads and they don't pay attention to what is the weight rating on the ball head. And you can't just go by the weight rating. So like if you're going to take a camera, let's say with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. Now I realize let's not do 70 to 200 because most of those have collars. So let's say a camera with a 100 millimeter or 135 millimeter lens. That's still a fair amount of weight out the front side of the camera. So the camera and that lens combination may weigh 5 pounds. But physics, it's actually going to feel a lot more than 5 pounds to the ball head. So you've got to make sure you're using a ball head that is substantial enough. And that brings in a bit of a problem if you're interested strictly in size and weight. You're going to need a bigger, heavier ball head, right? So it's always going to depend on what are you shooting, what are you trying to accomplish with the monopod. But yes, I have several ball heads. I mentioned I have the Sirui ball heads that I have used on my monopods from time to time. It all depends. Generally, if I'm shooting like sports, I don't need a ball head because I'm working with a longer lens, and that lens has a rotating collar. So I can go from horizontal to vertical, do it in the collar, okay? Norm, does the monopod make for better performance from IBIS? No, it's not a matter of better or worse. Norm, I'm old school. I don't give a damn about IBIS at all. It's great that the cameras have, so now this is going to open up a whole can of worms. So let me explain. I did the majority of my photography long before IBIS came around, right? Okay. So, and I took lots of great pictures without, problems. IBIS is a great feature. Okay. For those of you that may not know, IBIS, in-body image stabilization, right? IBIS is a great feature for a lot of people. They have a hard time steadying a camera. It allows them to be able to take pictures that previously they couldn't have done, etc. But for me, at least, I pay zero attention to IBIS. It's there, it's on, good for it, but I still do all the same things to stabilize a camera that I did when I was 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. I haven't changed in that regard. So I find that too many photographers today don't pay attention to proper shutter speed usage, don't hold the camera properly because they watch people on YouTube walking around holding the camera out here, taking pictures like they're Joe Cool, more like Joe Idiot, because that's not how you hold a camera, folks, right? Any of you, here, where's my bag? any of you that think the right way to hold a camera is like this, to take pictures, that is stupidity. Now, at the end of the day, do people care? Like when they look at your pictures, they care how you hold it? No, they don't. So there are photographers out there that you can all name who manage to get really good pictures doing this. The fact of the matter is they don't get really good pictures every single time. And the fact of the matter is they've blown a lot of pictures. And the fact of the matter is science says you can make your pictures a lot better by not doing that. That's probably why when you read the camera manuals, that's not how they tell you to hold the camera. And the irony of it is every camera on the market today, they tell you to hold it the same way because they're all built the same way. Just saying, right? So yeah, it's not really gonna help or hurt IBIS if you're following good fundamental guidelines with your lenses, meaning good rule of thumb, right? So this is not one of those photography rules. It's a rule of thumb. It's a practice that will save your butt. Avoid using shutter speeds that are slower than the focal length of your lens. So if you're using a 500 millimeter lens, the slowest shutter speed you should consider shooting at is 1/500th of a second. Okay? That doesn't guarantee you no motion. It doesn't guarantee you stop the action in front of you. That helps to ensure that you're not going to get camera motion, whether it's by hand or by moving it on a monopod, whatever. That is the slowest, safest speed to eliminate that from happening. Okay? All right. Let's see. Scrolling on down here. TC, I recently every time I see this, I think Tony and Chelsea, and I know this is not Tony and Chelsea, sorry. I recently shot inside at night with my new Sony a7 IV and my new Zeiss 55mm lens. I was so disappointed with how yellow everything was. I struggle with white balance, and I'm afraid to get off of auto white balance. Well, so TC, interestingly enough, you have just really highlighted why, auto is a bad word, right? Because here you are with this great camera. That's A7 IVs right here, okay? The auto white balance in this camera is outstanding, but it's auto, right? So auto, when it's not used properly, is the 4-letter word for forget about it, and that's what you do. You just set it on auto and you hope. You still have to pay attention to the light balance in your scene. And, that's what the previews are for in your camera, whether you're using the preview in the EVF or whether you're using the preview on the back screen. You're shooting with a mirrorless camera, so you knew that image was yellow. So all you had to do is change the white balance beforehand, right? And taking it off of auto, you can always put it back on auto. It's not like you're going to screw up your camera. Take it off of auto, right? There's a reason why there's that little yellow bulb symbol there, right? That would have eliminated the yellow, or at least most of it, okay? But learning to understand white balance, TC, look, it's not difficult. It's really not, but it's important, okay? Anytime you're using part of your camera on autofocus, you should actually be working harder to pay attention to the camera than when you're on manual. I'm dead serious. Dead serious. I talk about how when I shoot my grandson's playing baseball, I use auto ISO. I'm working 10 times harder to pay attention to what my camera's doing when I'm on auto ISO than if I set everything manually across the board. Okay. Daniel, I'm glad that you mentioned monopods. I had a bunch of long gigs last week. Mostly used a 70-200. Came away a bit sore. Yep. Believe me, that's what monopods are great for. They really are. That's why I mentioned in the things that list of things that I use monopods for. Event work is a great example of when monopods can come in really, really handy. And look, I'm not gonna lie, especially now that I get older, I am very conscious of how much gear am I taking, how much does it weigh, how long am I gonna have to be on my feet. But monopod's not a new thing for me. I'm not kidding. I was using monopods when I was a teenager. I've used them throughout my whole career. I'm a big fan of them, okay? Sean, the Carl Taylor cone thing. You said that. I didn't say that. But could you DIY it? Hell yeah, man. Come on. So let's see. Adam, I'm short on space at the moment. I like shooting still life, creative lighting, custom setup. Any suggestions for shooting in extremely small areas needing separation? Well, okay, so I frequently give people a hard time about like grids and things like that, but you know, your question's kind of general on the details, Adam, without knowing actual numbers and distances, plus what gear and what modifiers you're using. But it sounds like grids would be helpful for you, or even at a minimum to save you spending the money for that. Visit your local dollar store and get some black foam board, okay? And, you know, use the foam board as flags to prevent light, you know, kind of falling onto your background or that type of thing, which is actually what I tend to do. Not that I shoot tons of product work or still life that, but when I do, I don't haul out the grids and that. I just flag things. And, you know, I actually work in a fairly small space when I do that stuff, okay? Dance to Jam, purchased Sirui carbon fiber monopod several years ago at Houston Camera Exchange. Use it all the time. Question: the Sirui P426 SR is more expensive, which provides the expandable foot. Any value there? No, the expandable foot ones, the ones that had the feet that like drop down where then it kind of becomes a tripod. To me, number one, that defeats the purpose. Number two, they're all bigger. Number three, they're actually designed for video. The idea of, you know, you have a kind of use it in a pinch tripod for video. But no, I mean, and so they're great for that purpose. But you notice for my use, again, this is in Joe's kit, I didn't make any mention of using the monopods for video, which that's kind of a different conversation. But yeah, for me, I don't want to work with those. One, because they're all taller. They don't fold up as much. Two, they're heavier. And it kind of defeats the purpose. Okay. Kevin, I'm guessing the IBIS helps a little with the stability of holding the camera at arm's length. But it's not smart anyhow. Oh, Kevin, the IBIS does help. That's one of the only ways they get away with it, but you're actually missing what the real problem is. Here's the problem for human beings, and this is cognitive psychology. So for those of you that are maybe new, full disclosure, since you hear me talk about psychology so much, it's actually really important, and it's a really valuable piece of your photography. But I'm also married to a cognitive psychologist. I always state, fortunately for me, she's not a clinical psychologist. I'm sure that I'd be in a straitjacket by now. That said, cognitive psychologist, she is an internationally renowned researcher who studies how we learn, how the brain works, right? So here's the reality of things. When you're holding a camera out here, like this, okay? Even though you are focusing all of your attention right there on that LCD screen, the problem of it is your brain is weak. Your eyes are weaker. In fact, your eyes and your brain don't communicate super well. So the fact of the matter is what's happening is while you're focusing all of your attention on that screen, number one, it's really small. Everything is much smaller here than it is here. Number two, your eyes are feeding all of this peripheral information, all of it, to your brain. Even though you're saying, I'm just paying attention to that, you're a human, so you're not capable. Your brain is getting all of this stuff. So what you're doing is you're putting yourself at a serious disadvantage for one of the most important things of making a great photograph: the ability to pay attention to all of the little details. You're photographing a full-length person, which, you know, some of these cool YouTubers we see do this all the time. They're always out there taking 3/4 length and full-length shots, like on city streets. And then you notice from time to time, son of a gun, in the background, there's a blurry pole growing out of the person's head, which they probably blurred out a little bit more, or, you know, they shot it up 1.8 to get plenty of bokeh. It's still a pole sticking out of the person's head, and it's still distracting. That's why you don't do that. When you put the camera to your eye, and especially if you close your other eye, now you are just seeing an image.
you are depriving your brain of all that other information. So it is only seeing an image, which means there's a much higher likelihood that you are going to see the details, good and bad. They're going to help you make a great image. So yeah, so my point is, it's really nothing to do with the IBIS or the image stabilization. However, you're right, Kevin, that's a piece of it. It's really more about how do our brains work, period. Okay? So, gosh, I know that I'm just going to ruin that name. I'm going to go with Biendra. I apologize as I'm way off the mark there. What can I do to get the best clear pictures in museum artwork photography as an art photographer? Even after using reflected light and black cloth in front of the art object, I still get some reflections in the image. So a couple of things to consider here. I mean, if you're talking about accurately reproducing artworks, you're not going to do that in an art museum, right? So I'm assuming, since you're talking about cloth in front of the object and that's not what you're doing. You need to be in a very controlled lighting situation to do that, number one. Number two, you are generally going to work with very soft, very even, very diffuse light. But and so it's hard for me to give you a suggested setup without knowing exactly what kind of art and how you're photographing it. And is it behind glass, or are we talking sculptures, etc. But the other thing is, if you're reproducing artwork for, let's say it's going to be printed or it's going to be used at the art museum, whatever, publications, anything like that, you've also got to be extremely particular with your color reproduction. So paying attention to white balance, all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, if you get to photograph the Mona Lisa, you can't change the color, right? It's got to be a perfect match, right? So, yeah, that would be something I would actually really encourage you to join my TOGKnowledge community, which you'll find the link in the video below, or below the video here. And actually, I can share a link to TOGKnowledge for you, because I'm going to talk about that momentarily as we head out here. But I would encourage you to join that. And we can kind of continue that discussion, and I can get some more information from you to try and help you out. Okay. Sean, wondering what kind of material to use to make your DIY your own cones. Basically translucent plastic sheets. But here, I'll give you a little tip. Depending on how often you're going to use them, and depending on how big the items are you're going to shoot, you could actually go to Amazon and buy these dog collars right here for $15. You get all three. Now, they're smaller than they look, okay? But the biggest one in the set is about that tall and about 13 or 14 inches around, so if you're working with small things. But that's basically the type of, and it has a Velcro latch on one side. You can get bigger ones too. Dog collars. That way, everything's already pre-cut. It's already there, right? For me, I'd rather not use a cone. For me, remember the disclaimer: I don't do tons of product work. Okay. What I like about the bigger sheets of translucent material is you can wrap it in a cone if you want. You could lay it over objects. You can shape it better. I find the cones are actually really, really limited in terms of what you can put in them and how you can photograph it, okay? So, yep, Ron, it was the cone of shame. In fact, those are the ones that I bought for my dog when she got her surgery, and yeah, I realized that they would actually work just great, okay? The biggest thing is you want to make sure that you can't see your fingers through it. It needs to actually be diffuse. So in a perfect world, you're going to get something that's thick enough that's going to knock out maybe a stop or a stop and a half of light, and that's okay, right? Because it's actually the more light it's knocking out, the better in terms of softening the light, okay? Yeah, no, David, you don't want to go to Carl Taylor at all. I think you missed the point behind the conversation, okay? All right, gang, so listen, last thing up here, right? I have been talking about this pretty much every week. You only got a couple more weeks to get in before it's not going to be free to get in, okay? My TOGKnowledge learning community. And I know some of you that are here have not joined yet, but please listen close. Number one, if you haven't joined, you're going to regret that decision, right? This is, your opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor, to not have to spend any money. It's a new way of learning photography, right? It's not social media. It's none of that BS, but it does require that you want to learn. It does require that you're going to put in some effort. If you don't put in the effort, it's not going to do any good. But it is a one-of-a-kind learning destination for photographers. There is a link for you below the video. In fact, here, I'll go ahead and I will share it again one more time here in the chat so that you guys have it. Just do me a favor. When you get to that page, read everything and watch the video before you click join. Because if you jump ahead, there's a good chance you'll mess up the join process and you'll actually be removed. I told you, it's not social media. It's my classroom. I'm very strict with the way we do things, but you'll find that if you're willing to put in the effort, you will learn a lot in the TOGKnowledge community. Okay? All right, gang. So listen, great conversation. It was good to see that since we're talking about gear, so many of you felt that you just had to get your 2 cents in, because that's exactly what I started out talking about. But hey, it is what it is, right? As always, thank you for watching. I hope that some of you found some value in what I had to share tonight. And please, remember, you're not getting any younger. That means you've got less time left than you had yesterday. So go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot, gang. Adios.